Okay. Oh. That. What's that? That's my computer. We don't need that.
So y'all herbologists?
Oh, thank you.
Just interested. Just getting started. Interested in the Kava program or?
So, I'll just keep patient.
It is what it is, probably. You want me to help you?
I'm just trying to get. I was going to say, a lot of people follow that, so if you can make that. So good.
Don't worry about it.
Wow, how'd so many people get in here?
He snuck in.
I believe it.
Yeah. Good crowd.
No, see if it's up front.
We're more disorganized than usual because I'm getting ready for a big class tomorrow.
Oh, is it in your hand? Is that my phone? No.
Nope, this is your phone right here.
Oh,
So are the samples up there?
Sorry.
No,
Didn't know you were
we'll get
looking for
We'll have
yours.
some samples at the end.
Okay.
But no worries. And I won't promise it's any good because I kind of made it on the fly.
It's called serendipity. Is what it is.
That's it. And I'm going to pass these around if anybody wants a cool schedule of all the awesome shit we do here.
more classes that are coming each
Yeah,
Friday. Or not Friday.
All right,
Thank
take a deep breath. Evening all.
You have a lot of new people.
I was going to say, I see some familiar and some not familiar faces. It's funny, we just had the Kratom Convergence or whatever it was called down at Janus Landing. Was that last weekend?
I don't know.
And I think it was last Saturday. And we really wanted to have an opportunity to, folks who came there to get educated certainly did, but we wanted to have an opportunity to give people a little bit more information if they wanted it. So we purposely scheduled it right after that. And if you don't know, I'm Bob, and this is Renee, and it's the Bob and Renee Show. No.
It is.
And this is our clinic here. This is acupuncture and herbal therapies, but we also have an herb school, Tradition School of Herbal Studies. And normally we're teaching, clinical herb program from very beginner all the way through clinician. We've got 3 nights a week here. We've got herbal interns working, getting practice. We make sure they don't kill anybody. We have a Western night and a Chinese herbal medicine night. And then we also get interns from East West College in Sarasota that they come up here and get to practice herbs and acupuncture both. Anybody here from East West? No? We didn't sucker any of them? No. They're all slackers. And, one of the things, we started doing these classes, some of you have heard this, the free class, the school's been around for almost 20 years now. And we used to do more free lectures, and we kind of just ran out of time. And this past holidays in December or January, I forget what it was, we did a couple of free herb walks down at Boyd Hill. We had such an amazing, we had over 50 people at each herb walk, and we're like, we really got to reach out to the community better than we have been. And for those folks who, by time or money or whatever, can't make it, we wanted to make sure that our community is continuing to be educated about herbal medicine. So we started sticking in the Friday nights as often as we could, just to do our best to make it accessible to everybody. We've done everything from urban herb walks, where we literally were looking and finding the edible and medicinal plants here in the streets and alleyways here at Grand Central, and sometimes blocking traffic everywhere, which was kind of a problem. To things on Kava and Kratom, and we've got some coming up on everything from using food and herbs in support of cancer care. No kinds of, I think I have another cool stuff
Food
here.
energetics, and just whenever we see a call to reach out to the community, like I even tell my students that if I give them everything I know and make my job obsolete, then that means we're all caring for each other, and that's a good thing. That I'm not taxed, and other people can help other people, and then I can get the help I need, and that's the way it should be. So we're always very enthusiastic to tell you anything that we know and help you along your way. And the other surprising thing about having classes for free in December, we started that back up, was the amount of people that showed up, which is really always shocking to me that we're weirdos, and I know that we're weirdos, and we're plant weirdos, but to see all the other plant weirdos that show up, I'm like, oh, it's not just us. Like, that's crazy. And for real, I'm shocked each time that we have really actually more new faces tonight than average. Usually it's about half and half, our students and people we know. And so it's something to always strive for, to have a community outreach. So if there's anything that you want to see us talk about, I do know Bob's got a webinar that's coming up that you can see down at the bottom over there. And I have a secondary one, and I do know this is a popular class, and I'm happy to do a Friday night if it's something that you guys want, which is herbs for pets. Herbs for animals, really. Basically adaptogens, nervines, and nootropics for animals.
Renee, can you do that? Because I forgot something I got to grab real fast out in the yard.
Okay, just speak?
Yeah, just introduce the classes.
Okay. All right, and so we always want to provide as much to people who aren't actually our students as possible, just so in the community in a general sense, we have that outreach, and we consider it to be another connection to an environmental web that we would love to foster and continue forward. So if there's anything like that you guys want to see, feel free to always shoot an email out. We try really hard to keep the calendar up to date. We always list the things that are upcoming just in case. Anytime you see a celebration class, it's an actually class, it entails fire and drum circle and our half-acre medicinal garden at another place. And so just always know that's provided for the community. I think it's very important to create and give ceremony and allot that space for ceremony, because not everybody can just bust out with a fire in the middle of their yard like we can. And so sometimes you're just there because you need to go to the fire, and that's completely okay. So anytime you see any of the celebrations, it's just for you to be if you need to, and just consider that to be the case.
And what does Olivia stand for?
Oh, it's the summer solstice. So like I always celebrate the quarters and cross quarters because environmentally, that's when we make literal shifts in the planet and the earth. And so we always make sure that we're shifting ecologically into the next phase of what's coming. And so that would just be the summer solstice. So it's going to be our exact halfway point where we're tilted in a certain way on the planet. And so we just do everything that all the different traditions from every single continent that was centering around the shift in the planet at the time. So things like that. No? Any questions so far about anything I've said or what's up here? The Western 101s are something that we talk about that everybody should have. It's basically keeping you out of the Walgreens and the CVS, like before there was that thing. Like I can remember when there was an Eckerd's put into my town, and me being like, oh, look at this Eckerd's drugs. Well, my parents had to handle headaches and bumps and bruises and scratches and bee stings some other way. And I'm fourth generation here in Florida in a farm family, and so I've been spit on many a times because of a bee sting, like a spit poultice or something. And so I can completely remember the shift between it being me never going into a grocery store to get a baby aspirin to this is now all that we did. By the time my siblings were born, 10 and 12 years younger than me, they didn't recognize a space without that. Several grocery stores, several drugstores. So the 101 class is designed, it is the precursor to all of our other herbal classes, but it's designed for anybody, just to kind of give you the standard for each body system to help yourself, either outside with plants right out of the ground, or to keep you out of the Walgreens with things that you have available to you. So other than that, I think that we pretty much covered it. St. Pete Pride is, we talked about the webinar. Yeah. St. Pete Pride is just something that happens here. It's gigantic. I think it's the second biggest in the nation, the parade. And it's something that's going to happen down Central Ave here.
And in June, and I believe it's open to the public, June 19th for the American Herbalist Guild, which is kind of a professional organization for herbalists. For any of you who are medical professionals or want to go a little bit more in-depth about kratom, this one's going to be more for professional herbalists. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about the risk benefits combinations of those herbs with kratom and what we can use to replace kratom for people going through withdrawal, either from opiates, the use of kratom for opiate withdrawal, or for people who are having problems getting off of the kratom, how to get off of that. So we'll go into a little bit more depth with that than we can cover here. Just oftentimes here when it's just like we got the whole spectrum of folks, and so it's hard to really go into the depth that we need sometimes. But if you don't know it, so some of you are probably very familiar with kratom. I see lots of folks who've already been down the way, and I'm going to erase this unless anybody stops me. But some of you may not be. Both Kava and Kratom are very controversial herbs. There was an attempt about a year and a half ago, by the DEA to make Kratom illegal. Schedule it in the same way that they scheduled marijuana, and they tried to do an emergency schedule because, oh my God, nobody was getting hurt by it, and yet they wanted to do that anyway. And you know, I never done this before. As far as I did this at the Convergence, and I thought it was really important because for a lot of you, you only know about one or two, maybe three herbs, and that's the limited and the extent of what you think about herbal medicine. And your big run-in with the government's attempt to make a plant illegal was with Kratom. And for those of you who fought that good fight, if you don't know, you'll know by the end of this. And right now we're winning, but that struggle continues. But I want you all to know that Kratom is illegal in some states, in some cities and counties. Sarasota County, it's against the law. You can't have Kratom down there. That's insane. There is one of our state congresswomen continues on a regular basis to ban Kratom in this state. It is an ongoing fight in this state and in a number of other states. But I wanted to just let you all know that there are a number of plants either nationally or in specific states. The following herbs are against the law. Plants that are against the law: Kratom, Kava, comfrey, peyote, sassafras, psilocybin mushrooms, cannabis, ephedra, Psittacordifolia, Pinellia, coca, not the drug, the plant, poppy, rosy periwinkle, ackee fruit, tonka beans, ayahuasca, yopo, amanita, betel nut, belladonna, datura, hamia, mimosa hostilis, mandrake, iboga, salvia divinorum, and that was the short list.
This is so funny. Like, you see, like, I'm on my back's turned and he's naming this off, and now I'm like, this is so flippin' funny.
No, it's not. It's horrifying that these plants are against the law. This is a felony for me to take across the state line.
We just pulled it out of the ground.
This is Psittacordifolia.
It's one of my strongest medicines I have for asthma.
The FDA banned this about 15 years ago because it contains an alkaloid called ephedrine, which used to be an over-the-counter product that you could go in, you had it in your inhalers. Here it is in its natural form. Yeah. It's against the law. And one of the reasons why we do this, one of the reasons, like last Saturday was my birthday, and I went and talked to the Kratom Convergence, because if we don't educate, if we don't pay attention, we're going to lose more plants. We're going to lose Kratom. We'll never regain our access to this. If you thought cannabis was a big deal to lose, wait till we start losing almost all of our plants, where you have to wonder if you can get basil or sage to put in your turkey. Sage, you know, salvia. So salvia divinorum is against the law. Why not salvia officinalis? Some of the same chemicals. Hops that's made beer is actually got some of the same cannabinoids that cannabis does. Go figure. Oh yeah, and chocolate. Why couldn't they ban that? Because that actually fills opiate receptor sites. How's that for a shocker? Why do you think you like chocolate so much?
There's several of the plants that Bob ordered that I can walk into any grocery store on the continent of South America and get in the grocery store in a tea bag. Like, it's just, there it is. Children drink it all the time.
Yeah, Coke is actually a lovely light tea that
helps you with altitude sickness.
Less jittery than coffee. Coffee's way worse and more addictive.
The rosy periwinkle is something that if you guys have been in Pinellas County or on beachside in Florida your whole entire life, you've seen everywhere. It's these pretty little pink and white flowers that have 5 petals that spray out. In Africa, we use it for all kinds of infections like UTI, but it's everywhere. You can get it out anywhere, and people don't realize that that's banned because the government says that they need to protect us.
At the moment, you can go to Home Depot in the garden section and either buy a bronchial dilator, a hallucinogen, or a deadly poison, all the same plant, datura. The belladonna plant is literally sold at Home Depot and Lowe's and plant centers everywhere. Lines our streets.
It's in our back.
But that one's legal in most states. So it really is whatever they decide at the moment is an issue. And so we do have to pay attention. You do have to make phone calls and send emails and sign petitions and all that good stuff. It only takes a few moments. Yes, sir.
You know, I get confused with tomato. Is that the belladonna family or the mandrake family?
Actually, it's the
Nightshade.
solanaceae. Yeah, it's a
Solanaceae.
nightshade.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, some of those plants fall into those categories. So yeah, but tomatoes still legal at the moment. So you know, hey, it could easily become illegal if it's all of a sudden patented and
There's
they decide
seeds
to
up
control
here.
it.
Anybody
So,
can come
yeah,
if you
there's
want.
plenty.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
So-
seeds right here.
I'll get off my political soapbox for a brief moment.
But it's a slippery slope. Like
Yeah.
he needs to be, because I worked for education freedom in the state of Florida for many years, the past 20 years, and there used to be all kinds of, well, it used to be my job that I would have to go through legislation that was coming up, sometimes quarterly, and find a space inside of there. It was for education, remember, that it said that our home gardens would be illegal to save us from poisoning each other if we traded food. And so it was my job to find this bit of legislation that would outlaw us having a backyard garden to save us from poisoning ourselves with E. coli or something. And so all it would take was me telling our education group, you need to vote no on this, and it's just one 30-second call that is just calling. An intern answers the phone and says, it's calling our state house. The intern answers the phone and says, yay or nay, what bill? You say bill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nay, and literally it's just making a hatch mark. And at midnight that night, how many nays, how many yays, that's the way the person will vote. It's as easy as that. You don't have to talk to anyone, you don't have to say your name, and that is what kept us from having that pass all this time. I haven't done it in 4 years because I've been working as an herbalist more full time.
is.
That's my point. So who's doing it now for us? Like if you guys don't do it, then that's what happens.
And if anybody's curious, I'm going to pass the seed around. I did pull this out of the lot next door, and there's probably cat pee on it or something. But if you're curious, this is probably in your backyard. You know it is wireweed.
Broomweed, witch's weed, wired weed,
It's
goat weed.
also an Ayurvedic herb called bala. It's uniquely tridoshic, which means it's good for all 3 body types. When we start to look at Pitta, Vata, Kapha, this is actually considered appropriate. It's in the mallow family, so it's moistening as well as bronchial dilating.
It's also food.
It helps your lungs.
I grew up eating it.
You know. So, and that's Ceta cordifolia. And I'm not positive it's the cordifolia, but all the cetas are illegal, basically. But let's talk about kratom. This is a tree that grows in Southeast Asia. It's a tropical tree. Look, here's one now. It grows fairly well down here. I had hoped to have some planted up that I could sell to anybody who wanted them, but they're not quite ready yet. I looked at them this morning. There's little rootlets on it and some new buds, but they're not ready yet. So another couple of weeks if anybody wants some. It's been used for thousands of years, as many plants are. And one of the main areas of use and export is in Thailand. And it was banned there for a while. And a lot of people go, well, look, the place where it's native to has banned it. There was a problem. It had been used by folks for a long period of time in the same way that we might use cocoa, we might use coffee as a stimulant to help people who are doing hard labor. It's an effective painkiller. But the reason it got banned is there was a drug culture that was using a combination of kratom, cough syrup that had codeine in it, and Coca-Cola. I think there might have been a 4th ingredient. Not really. It was called 4x400. And so they were getting high as a kite off the codeine plus the kratom. That's where the real problem came from. Please don't go try that.
Don't be the idea.
Yeah, right. You can make meth out of the aceta too. That's why I got banned. Any of you are meth makers? No, you know.
It takes a lot of seeds.
It's a lot of aceta. We've tried. No, I'm just kidding. So we've seen the legality change actually now in Thailand a number of times back and forth, because what they've found is it does have a traditional cultural use. And more importantly, as we see the opiate epidemic becoming rampant in not just this country, this is a worldwide problem, that it fills the opiate receptor sites in the body. So what that means is people who are trying to get off of opiate drugs can use this to minimize their side effects, but it's also an effective, oh, I'm throwing things. That's why I got a lot of these. It's also an effective painkiller. It's interesting though, this plant can be used anything from a mild euphoric, a feeling of well-being. If you do it inappropriately, one of two things can also happen. You can get a little loopy from it, kind of like you just did a shot of alcohol, or you can puke. And it's nice in that it is a tad bit self-limiting, because if you drink it too fast, you'll vomit. And vomiting isn't much fun, generally not dangerous, and it gets something out of you that your body said, I don't want it anymore. So if you have tried it and you are like, why do I feel like crap? You drank it too fast. I find that a lot of people go, oh, it tastes yucky, and then they slam it back, and then it's not fun. She did that.
I don't do well with it.
The interesting thing, we've now, and for any of you, check out the American Kratom Association. They're an organization that is working very hard to be the watchdog against the FDA and the DEA. And the FDA has come out periodically over the last year with very strong cautionary statements with the intention of banning kratom. And they pointed at a number of deaths that they were associating with kratom. The American Kratom Association went and said, show me. I want to see the autopsy reports. I want to see the case studies. Basically refuted, I believe, all of them, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe all 30 plus cases that were presented by the FDA have been shown to have a number of other drugs that they overdosed on. There happened to also be kratom in their body, and we're going to see a similar tale when we talk about kava here in a little bit. I hate to say it, this is an ongoing struggle that we've dealt with, in that this is a plant that is competing against the pharmaceutical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry has multi-billion-dollar industry and maybe more. And yet, something that people are making money off of this plant. And don't think they're not. There's a kratom kava bar on every block at this point, which is fine, because there's not as many of those as there are bars. There's way more bars. And that's a way more dangerous drug. It was interesting when the DEA tried to schedule kratom a year and a half ago. They tried to ban it, not this past November. We were going to the AHG conference. I was actually presenting about kratom at the American Herbalist Guild conference a year in some November. We brought 10 kilos of kratom in our car up there to the conference. And the day I was lecturing was the day it was supposed to be scheduled. It was a little horrifying. I was like, oh, great, on live TV, I'm going to commit a felony.
It was a great class.
I was horrified. It wasn't until the end of the class that I found out that the ban had not gone through. But it was then in January, so as an herbalist, I have to follow not only the herbal industry, but I also have to follow the pharmaceutical industry, because most people are on pharmaceutical drugs as well as taking supplements and herbs. And so we have to be very cognizant of herb-drug interactions and possible issues that people are coming with caused specifically from the medications. So there was this great news release that it was in final stage trials that there was this new drug that was a miracle of pain relief. And chronic pain is obviously a very serious issue. And it was safer than opiates, and it was a synthetic form of a chemical called mitragynine, which is one of 100 active chemicals in this plant. It certainly raises the question that a few months before this news release came out about this brand new pharmaceutical drug that was going to completely change the pain treatment industry, that they tried to ban the plant that contains that chemical in probably a safer form. And it raises the question, prescription drugs are usually a single chemical. They're very well researched, sometimes appropriately, sometimes not. Drugs will save your life. The pharmaceutical drugs, they'll also kill you. It's about dosage, it's about how you use it and whether it's properly prescribed. But it's very easy to research and understand how a single chemical reacts in your body. What receptor sites it fills, we can track the side effects. It's actually pretty good. We talk about, depending on who you read, 50 to 100 active constituents in this plant. The reality is there's over 10,000 different chemicals in here. It's difficult to understand how that responds in the body. Where does it act? How does it act? Think about a carrot. There's 10,000 chemicals in a carrot. It's not just vitamin A for your eyes. It's not like I can squeeze a carrot and get a vitamin A juice out of it. And yet we feel carrots and lettuce and all these things that are full of all kinds of different chemicals are fairly safe. And not to imply that all plants are safe. Oleander will kill you. Comfrey over time will actually cause liver failure in little babies. Comfrey will actually cause death. And misused, this plant can cause a problem. You heard me say a few plants when I read off that list of banned plants. Poppy. It's a pretty little flower. I was in France like 10 years ago. Poppies were growing everywhere. If you've ever been to Afghanistan, there's a lot of poppies there. And unfortunately, what do? They extract a single chemical out of that plant that, used correctly, is a powerful pain-killing drug. Those are your opiate drugs. They come from opium poppies. Misused, we're using heroin. And that obviously has some long-term negative side effects. The same is true of coca. For 10,000 years, people chew the coca leaf. I was in the Amazon almost 25 years ago and went to the grocery store and bought some coca tea. It was lovely. It was a very light tea. It was much preferable over green tea. No addiction, no real side effects, not overly jittery, but you pull cocaine out of there, a single chemical, it's an issue. So we have to understand there is a difference between a plant and a single chemical extracted from a plant, concentrated and used inappropriately. I would say when we talk about kratom, there's lots of different ways that we can utilize this plant. The primary way that it's used is as a tea. I don't have chronic pain. This tree is actually in the coffee family, and so it has a stimulant effect. And for me, being Mr. ADD, I used to drink ridiculous amounts of coffee. Now I don't. I drink kratom instead. I find that it has a mild mood elevating property to it, and it helps me with the focus. So I'm lucky I don't have chronic pain.
Are you addicted to it?
That's a great question. So I would say I was mildly addicted to coffee. Like if any of you, enjoy 2 or 3 cups of coffee during your day and you stop for a couple of days, you get headaches, irritability. I was the same. Periodically I'd not have coffee. I was out camping or something. I'd be like, for a day or two. So this does fill the opiate receptor sites. And so it does have, and it has caffeine in it, so it has the potential for addiction. So periodically, about every 6 or 8 weeks, I stop for 3 or 4 days. And this is me, Bob. I find it less of an issue than coming off of coffee. I don't actually notice. So what do? When I don't drink this, I drink coffee. And so it's like, whatever. I'm like, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. I still like coffee. This is kinder to my body, I think. That said, without a doubt, I know of a number of people who had a way more serious reaction stopping kratom, where they compare it to opiate withdrawal. And I would say they have not found it to be quite as severe or as long-lasting, but equally unpleasant. The sweats, the tremors, the nausea, vomiting, but it's isolated folks. And I hate to say it, they're in the realm of addiction. There's a number of different theories as to what is addiction, why is there addiction. My brother is a recovering alcoholic, among other things, and it was funny. My mother used to really struggle. Like, he's smarter than that. My brother's super smart. It's not about smart. I used to smoke cigarettes. Well, duh, smoking cigarettes is bad for you. Right. And I like to think I'm a smart guy, and yet I was dumb enough to sit there and just puff it away. And there's the thought with a number of drugs, and there's a hereditary component there, they think. But there's also a component of what's called dual diagnosis. The idea that you have an underlying physical, emotional, or mental issue that you're self-medicating with, whether it's through booze or pills, opiates, kratom. And so for those folks, they seem to, and I would say if there's that in combination with a genetic link, I think they have the hardest time stopping anything, whether it be cigarettes. And I stopped cigarettes. It was hard. It wasn't that hard. And so I think you'll find that people who struggle with addiction of stuff, they will struggle with this stuff as well as they would any other stuff. Folks who, and opiates are a weird one. Any of us could be an opiate addict. It is so easy as you get in a car accident, your doctor writes you a script for a couple of weeks of Oxy, you're an addict. You will go through withdrawal at the end of that prescription. And if you complain of pain up until very recently, although still recently sometimes, here's another couple of weeks of script. Now I guarantee you're an addict. So any of us could be in that boat. It isn't got anything to do with race, income, parenting, or anything else. It's dumbass luck, and that sucks. Plants, it's funny, when we talk about herbs, there's usually, in this crowd, there's probably 3 herbs most of you would think about: Kava, Kratom, and wheat. And those are all herbs that can be used and misused, but they're powerful medicine. I'm here to tell you there's an awful lot of herbs beyond those. And oregano, basil, pepper, those are actually medicinal herbs, and they're yummy in your soup. We've forgotten as a culture about understanding herbs as meds. In China, herbs are called drugs, because we'd be lying if we said we don't use herbs like drugs. Like, you can go and drink some slippery elm, or you could take a Tums if you've got acid reflux. If you overindulged or you can't sleep because you get bloating at night, you could drink some chamomile, or you could take a sleeping pill. Well, aren't we just using that like a drug? It's a little less harmful. So in the same way that you wouldn't just randomly go out to the pharmacy and say, I need a couple of Oxys and some Valium, you don't get to do that because it's really dangerous. It's hard to kill yourself with a plant, but we've lost our respect for it. And so understanding that this plant is powerful medicine, this isn't chamomile, and it can be used recreationally, without a doubt. The very first time I used the kratom, I went down to not Mad Hatter's, that was later, Low Tide, and I love Low Tide. I say we have a kava bar for any theme you want in this town. We have one of the largest collection of kava and kratom bars, so you want Key West, you go to Low Tide. You want a 70s gate disco, you go to Mad Hatter's. And, you can kind of really have a lot of fun. There's a nice jazz bar that's a kava bar. And, the very first time I went, I was just tired after I was working Green Thumb Festival for a while. And I was like, I'm sore, I'm tired. I was a little wired, so I wasn't ready to settle down for the day. So Trina, some of you know her, was helping me out. And I was like, what are you going to go do? I'm bored. And she got packed up. She's like, I'm going to go down to Low Tide. I'm like, well, I was wanting to try kratom, and I never had. So I was like, oh, and as a social lubricant, it was lovely. As an ADD guy, I can't make eye contact very easily. And I was sore. I had 3 days of hauling plants, standing on my feet, working an event. I was like, oh no, I was sore. I wasn't injured, but I was sore. And 15, 20 minutes after I was drinking that first cup, I was like, oh, I'm being chatty. This is all an act, by the way. I'm not, I go sit in the closet by myself. I prefer it. And so I was chatty, I was making eye contact, and my legs weren't hurting anymore. I was like, oh, this is nice. And as I played with it, I saw that, if I drink it too fast, I was like, oh, now my belly's upset. That's no fun. So I played around with it a little bit and got to understand the plant and respect it. There's an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about. We talk about the energetics of herbs. This idea that something is hot or cold, wet or dry, or nourishing or reducing. And you all experience it, you just don't use the language that I do. So if you eat watermelon in the summertime, it cools you off. You have some ginger, it warms up your digestion. It literally feels warm. It's not spicy like cayenne pepper. We eat soup. It's nourishing. If you try too much, I don't have a good example, too much senna tea, it's getting rid of excessive stuff. You poop a lot. And so every food, every plant can be described as hot and cold, wet, dry, and deficient and excess. And every disease can as well. Each of you, some of you in here right now are warm, some are cold, some are really comfortable. And yet the temperature's the same. Your body temperature is probably exactly the same, 98.6-ish. Some of you will tend to always drink water and always be dry. Some people never drink water and always feel wet. I tend to be a wet person. I'm deficient in wet. Kratom is dry. So it's a gift from the military. I spent 5 years in the Army, Desert Storm vet, yada yada. And I tend to have chronic sinusitis now. So nose is always going. If I eat the wrong foods, I have a lot of digestive issues, all of them very phlegmy. If I drink this, I'm not so phlegmy. So guess what happens for the thin, dry, wiry person? It's too much. So if you tend to be that dry person, I'm a little bit more kapha if you're into Ayurvedic stuff. I'm a little wetter, a little denser. If you're pitta or vata, thin, wiry kind of person, you need to be careful with this. It will cause constipation. It will cause dry skin. It may cause rashes. It may cause insomnia. I drink this right up till I go to bed. It's not a problem. So it will, as with all things, everybody's going to get a slightly different benefit and potential harm from it. So it's about respecting the plant and the plant medicine as it is. And that doesn't mean you can't use it recreationally. That's okay. Yes, sir.
Since you delved into the Chinese nature and description,
Yeah.
Would you say it's hot, cold, neutral, cool?
I debate that with myself. I was chatting with Michael Tierra, California, and he was actually saying it was cold. If it was cold, I would have problems with it. I would call it neutral to slightly warm. So,
And drying? And drying?
And very dry, yes. Without a doubt. It's certainly not the driest herb I got, but it's pretty dry. I'm very happy with it. It's dramatic how quickly it helps my sinus issues. It's quite lovely. Yeah.
I've seen 3 different types. I mean, when I've gone to a Kratom bar before, like a red, a green, a white.
Thank you.
Are they just
Yeah.
different strains? Or?
So, it's so funny. I think all the folks in Indonesia are laughing at us because the story changes regularly. And so, exactly what he said. There's white, green, and red. And there's gold, and there's yellow, and there's super blah, 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 blah. These are the 3 basic ones.
Yeah,
and when I first started trying to learn and understand this plant, these were like subspecies. Some had a red vein, some a green vein, and blah, blah, blah. As time is going on, I'm finding out it's really just about harvesting the different types, that they're all the same damn plant. And it's about when they're harvested. And I've been trying to, I've had this one now for 2 years. And it's funny. This vein is a little red.
Wow.
This one's a little green.
Wow.
So I won't swear to which it is. But I'm starting to think that it's all the same damn plant.
Do you subscribe to any of the notion that maybe the white treats the lungs, green liver, gallbladder?
It's an interesting, so without a doubt, the whites are more stimulating, greens kind of middle of the road, and reds are more relaxing. And we could look at that merely as different growth periods and the amount of caffeine that may be in there. It could be as simple as that. So
how much caffeine is in Kratom?
not as much as coffee. The percentages vary, but it's not significant. Like, I don't get jittery from it. And that may be the variation, the combination of the different chemicals in there having a counter effect in the same way that you have with tea. It has caffeine, not as much as coffee, but there's L-theanine in there, which has a relaxant effect. So probably what we're seeing is there are other alkaloids in here that have that relaxing effect in there to keep it from being this.
So about the same as black tea?
That would be my guess, and I don't remember. If anybody knows, feel free to chime in. I'm not morally opposed to that.
I would put something on that. I've tried it for work a few times,
Yeah.
2 days a week, where I was doing some caffeine during those times.
Uh-huh.
And significantly lowering of blood pressure within 2 or 3 months, as opposed to taking caffeine.
Yes.
So I noticed a definite, so if it does have caffeine in it, like you were saying, I think there's something that balances it out, because it is significant.
And so I would say, I wouldn't say, ooh, this is a great thing for hypertension, but for stress-induced stuff, because there's a mood elevation, and I don't want to use the term adaptogen because I wouldn't go that far with it, and adaptogens are herbs that are generally considered safe and help people adapt to stress. I'm sure we could argue it, but I think the mood aspect of it is probably like stress that causes high blood pressure. You know, especially that 140, 145 over 90, 95, that's usually stress. And so that wouldn't surprise me at all.
The other thing is the how we get in America today in particular, how we get caffeine is extremely challenged. That the processing we do to coffee causes neurotoxins. The black tea is a different kind of caffeine extract, anything in an energy drink versus the caffeine you get from something like green tea. So it's just a completely different active particle on your spinal cord and your neurological system. So that this coming from a whole plant versus a derivative or something that we've done to it, like roasting it, using its fruit, whatever the process would be, wherever that caffeine was coming from, would be a different kind of caffeine as well, using the whole plant.
So, and I want to add, there's super is one of the new ones out there. So you can get a super white, super green, super whatever.
Super. Huh?
Yeah, it's super duper. And I've actually seen more adverse effects from the super than I have with the other strain. And we'll talk about the other aspect of it that you'll hear, like green Ming Da and red Borneo and all of that.
Could the nausea that a lot of people experience, could that be a detox, like a moringa detox?
Nah, it's actually, there's herbs in there, or chemicals in there that make you nauseous. So
And I'm sure
you can be the healthiest guy in the world.
Yeah.
If you shoot it, you're going to puke.
Yeah, I'm sure that Bob's talked about it. It has to do with your actual gut. It's not really necessarily the plant more than you. Like each person's different, and so that their digestion of it will be different. And whether you're hot, cold, wet, dry, phlegmy, something's in your stomach, how you stomach certain things, the same way that you can have somebody who can down a Coca-Cola in the morning and do nothing, and then you do it and your stomach might hurt from it. So every body type is different, so it's going to have a different effect on each person to some extent.
And there's a lot of plants that do that. Lobelia is a very common plant that fills nicotine receptor sites that people use to get off of cigarettes. And if you do too much, you'll puke.
Drinking black tea in the morning on an empty stomach. Drinking black tea on an empty stomach will do it. Like that's not that's a very normal thing to get a stomach ache from drinking black tea. The other thing is that this lesson with strain, like what we hear, that the strains are all different. Like some are more likely to cause the nausea, and the other thing is that the empty stomach, protein specific or not. So again, it's like thinking about some people drinking a soda or drinking a black tea on an empty stomach in the morning is going to cause them to have bubble guts. And for me, it's like immediate projectile vomiting. Right back out. Like,
so the supers, I've gotten different reports over the years. When I first got super, talking to the distributors and all of that, we heard it was fermented. I was like, awesome, that's going to make it more bioavailable, probably easier on the digestion. And then I found out that was BS. And so now the story is, and because I haven't made it to Indonesia yet to check it out for myself, is what they're doing is they're removing the stem. And most of the active constituents are in the leaf. This is my belief, that this is a buffering agent that has different constituents. And when the plant is used together, we don't get it. When I drink the supers, I get jittery like I just had coffee. I get nauseous way faster. So for those of you who are like, ooh, super must be better, use way less. Yes?
So supers then are actually adjusted or they're manipulated?
By just removing the stem. Yeah.
Just your regular white versus super white. The super white has been manipulated.
By removing the stem, yeah.
Okay.
So any of the supers My understanding is that the stem has been removed. And I think this is important.
Yeah.
Doesn't taste any different, but yeah. And every part of a plant is different. And I'm going to go back to beating up on poor little carrots. We go to the grocery store and you ever buy it with the leaves still on it, right? Do the leaves taste like the carrot? They don't. The root tastes dramatically different. If you get a beet, you eat a beetroot and you eat that, it's different. The leaf of a strawberry tastes different from the strawberry fruit. So we don't bother to pull stems out and taste a stem and compare it to the leaf or the bark. But the reality is, it's a different structure, therefore it has different chemicals, and it will taste and have different action. So we carry the super, I won't use it anymore. I decided I didn't like it. I like my buffered stuff. In general, if people are like, I've never done it before, I'm frightened, start with the green and make sure you have food in your belly. That's always the easiest way to go. And sip it, don't guzzle. That's really important. You don't want to like just see how fast you can go it. There are, well, let me talk, like we'll see Borneo and Thai and Mingda. Those are where they grow them. That's the only thing that is. So you can get Costa Rican coffee, you can get Brazilian coffee. It's still coffee. It tastes a little different because the climate's different, the soil's different, and so we have a different concentration of the nutrients. So you'll get a subtle difference in shift, but it's not dramatic. It's still this tree. Yep.
Yeah, these teas, some of the boxes have herbal and some don't. And somebody told me there is a difference in just regular, say, red tea versus another red tea when it's got herbal on the box. So what does that really mean?
So if it should by law have any ingredients. If it's anything other than this plant, it by law has to be listed. That doesn't mean everybody abides by the law.
That's true.
I hate to say it, know your source. It's one of the reasons I started carrying kratom here was, it's like I like to think I do a different level of checks. I make sure that the people I buy it from send it to a lab to be tested to make sure it's the right species, that it's not adulterated. If anybody, this isn't one for the kratom, but it's what's called these are some other herbs I just got in. Certificate of analysis, and it gives you bacterial counts, it gives you species, and it's basically for a couple $100 you know that you're getting a decent product, that it's not adulterated. I'll give you know who you're getting it from. And there's lots of good people who are doing good quality control checks around here. I'm not a fan of the extracts. So you can get 5-to-1 concentrated kratom, it gets you something.
Yeah.
Those, tend to have more side effects. There has been reports of adulteration. It's really easy to adulterate extracts and concentrates. Use this, just the plant. It's way easier to do.
So there's not different species, like in coffee, isn't there like Arabian or Robusta?
There's like 2 or 3 different species within that. The word's still out on that. I've gotten very conflicting views of it. The main thing I think right now is harvesting time. Where in its growth cycle that the plant is. I didn't really chewed on one of these before. Let's talk about making it real fast, because I still got to talk about kava, because kava rocks too. When dosing, I always encourage, if you're making it yourself, start low, see how you respond. 1 to 5 grams is a good start. And there's a variety of, you can make it super strong and all of this stuff. It extracts well in an acid, so you can use vinegar,
Citrus.
orange juice. So I like nasty tasting things. So as a culture, we only know 2 flavors. We know sweet and salty. That's it, And so we lack other flavors, in particular bitter and sour. I'm here to tell you this plant is bitter. And add vinegar to that, and you got a lovely sour. And so I actually like starting my day with this. I don't know why. Yes, and we could use lots of other things. And it's funny, I was just talking about this. Why were we looking at those pictures from Ecuador? I was down in Ecuador.
For class, we were.
Oh, yeah.
we
I
were
did a
doing
TV
class.
series down in Ecuador, a 12-part series. And we were visiting this one herbalist. We were visiting all these different healers down in Ecuador. And the very first place we stopped, and we went and harvested all these herbs, and we laid them out, and he talked about them on film. But there was a couple of limes sitting there, and I'm like, what's with the limes? It was salt as well, was the other thing. And he goes, oh, it makes the medicine work better. This man didn't have electricity, much less any other kind of thing where he didn't get to go on the internet and say, the alkaloid is put into solution to increase absorbability. No. His daddy and his daddy before him said, squirt some lime juice in there and it makes the medicine better. Squirt some lime juice in there, it makes the medicine better. You know? And these guys don't know alkaloids. They just know this is what we do to make this plant work better. So when I make mine, I probably use a little bit more than this. I'll actually make mud. I'll just add enough acid, enough of the apple cider vinegar to make some mud, and then I'll pour hot water over it and let it steep. I'll do that in the morning. I go take a shower, come back. It's nice mud. I like mine chilled, so I throw ice in it. I don't make this was the same one I made this morning. I add water to it all day long. It also forces me to drink more water. I'm terrible about drinking water.
I have a little bit to say about this, just from the standpoint of everybody's not Bob and doesn't drink gross stuff, and we're used to feeding people nasty crap off the ground, and so there's like a curve to all this to normal people. But the first thing is, when we add something like orange juice to it, that lots and lots of people want to make it better because it tastes bitter, and we've annexed that from our vocabulary. The bitter is allowing you to digest it properly. It's increasing your absorbability of it. Plain and simple, when we have bitter greens before we eat our meal, it's so that our meal is accepting of the vitamins and minerals better. The other thing is, any kind of acid is going to break through and break loose any vitamins and minerals inside. That's what we use specifically to extract minerals out of other plants. And so it's allowing you to actually have health from it, to gather its actual medicinal properties. But the third thing, just like using a soda on an empty stomach or anything that's very, very sweet on an empty stomach, the sugar has an increase of nausea to it. If you get something that's really, really very sweet. When I first was introducing this to some people that they own a coffee shop and they wanted to know what this was all about, and they trusted Bob and us to get them product that was organic and good to go. How do we do this? She started using, I don't want to bash Tropicana, but I think it was like Tropicana citrus mix. Like just something that you would buy a citrus drink out, and by de facto, I would consider that poison to begin with. Like literally, it's probably dyed orange, literally. And she was using that because she could hardly stand the taste. It kept telling me how sick she was getting, And then I had him make it for me one morning because I was up the street, and then I ran it up there and let her squeeze a crap ton of honey into it. And then it was the same flavor, but she didn't get nauseous from it. So just be careful of lots of people do
Orange juice is super common.
shaking it in the orange juice and not brewing it at all. Lots of people do that. But if you have an orange juice that is syrupy, sweet, gross, not orange juice, then you might be getting nauseous literally from the sugar content of that, which is more than a Snickers bar. And the other thing about that is whenever, think about black tea, just your black tea or your coffee. You would never take your black tea or your coffee and shake it into cold water and be like, why isn't this giving me the caffeine I need? And so that's another reason why we encourage the brewing more than anything, is that you're wasting your medicine, basically. You're wasting your good tea
And it ain't cheap.
if you don't brew it, yeah. I mean, it's something to think about, how you wouldn't throw anything else into cold water and be like, I don't understand why this isn't the coffee that I had yesterday brewed. And so that will help you a lot. Have your medicine be stronger, be more adaptable to your system, and go longer, for sure.
So in general, if you're using this for pain, you'll find 4 to 6 hours of relief. Some people a little more, some people a little less. Everybody's system's a little bit different. A lot of people use capsules to avoid the lousy taste. You won't get as good a benefit because you're not activating it with the acid, and you got to break down the pill. So if you've had the last 20 or 30 years, you've been taking NSAIDs, you've been taking Tylenol or codeine, your gut's trashed. And so you're going to have a harder time breaking that capsule down and absorbing it. I find also you don't always know the quality of what's in a capsule. I've seen some good products and I've seen crappy product that comes through capsules. So if you're getting it fresh, you can smell it, taste it. You know that it's supposed to be bitter and yucky, so when you taste it, we have people come in all the time to the clinic and they're like, is this supplement any good? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know the brand. You open it up, you stick your tongue on it and taste it. And if you know what an herb's supposed to taste like, then you can tell. But I would say half the time when I do that, it doesn't taste right. A lot of times the stuff in capsules is garbage, and that's a shame. So you got to know where your medicine's coming from. Yes, ma'am?
You had an online question about burning out the yin. Can kratom burn out your yin?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say so. I would say coffee is worse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is way slower. And actually, thank you, because I'm going to wrap this up, because I want to talk about how it prevents some of the side effects of that. And I did brew, and I haven't tasted it. It's probably crappy, but I was in a hurry and trying to do too many things at the same time. But you can use more than this. This is a starting very light dosage just to see how you respond. You can go up from that. Your vomit will keep you from doing too much more than that. But I would say about 15 grams 4 times a day would be top end. Most people don't need anything more than that. At that point, you're probably not getting any more benefit from doing more of it. But if you're doing it every day, if you're overusing it, if you're that dry, wiry person, how do we counteract the constipation, the dry skin, the rashing, itchy, excessive thirst that you might be dealing with? And this is where energetics and these concepts of formulation really come in.
Do you want me to talk about that a little bit, and you start to bring it in, and then you can finish that?
Oh, no, we'll bring it at the end, because
Okay.
we're going to talk about kava stuff.
Oh, okay.
Do you ever use oil as a carrier instead of water?
I haven't.
But within gummies, that would be similar.
Yeah, it's not even oil.
No.
Yeah.
Activators for people who are sensitive to acid. Do you have?
You can just do
alternatives?
water.
Don't activate it.
And you can
Okay.
actually cook it, so where some plants, the alkaloids are destroyed by heat,
Mm-hmm.
you can boil the crap out of this.
Okay.
And it makes it gross and strong.
So let me tell
Good.
you something real quick to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and what it even meant by the question. So what the question was about a yin deficiency, which means nothing to almost everybody in here except for 1 or 2 people. What it basically means is if you are thin and wiry and dry, or if you just tend to be that way, or your digestion tends to be that way, or you're a fiery person, depending on what dichotomy you're using, and this is causing you to use more energy, to have more energy, you're going to burn more fuel. And if in fact you don't have that fuel to burn, it's got to come from somewhere. And that goes for any caffeine source, any energy drink. We're always pushing for more energy, but really we probably need a steak, some broccoli, and some sleep. And that would give us more energy in the morning. And so we're always in that society where we're pushing for more. So people who naturally burn the candle on both ends or don't have anything to spare, it's going to start to wreak havoc on their system or kind of cause a little bit of unsteadiness or anxiety, just as if you drank too many Red Bulls, too much caffeine, or dried yourself out too much or became malnourished in some way. And so I have 2 children here that frequent the Kratom Kava bars, plus they work in here weighing out Kratom if any of you guys have ever got it from us. And one of them is a beast of a child. I look about at his neck. He's burly, he's squishy, he's thick, to give him a compliment. He's like this burly Viking dude. And literally, Kratom's exactly what he needs. He's a little squishy, a little thick, like he needs to kind of burn off some of that phlegm, where the other one came in like with striated muscles as a 4-year-old, had like little biceps and little delts, and so he has to watch it, that he'll have to put it with something that's more nourishing. With him, you said something about an oil, it would be more like the food he was eating at the time, like he would need avocado, not an actual capsule of oil, or it'd have to be in a carrier other than water, or it'd have to be the whole leaf that he was ingesting because he needed the actual nourishment from the leaf. So what happens in the clinic with any of our herbal medicines, when we see a medicine that would work really good for you, but for some reason, like I described, it shouldn't go to you, we use formulation to get it to you properly. So any of these things that Bob's are putting up here will go to different parts of your body and nourish them to keep that effect from happening.
So I do want to talk about these. And You can put these right into your Solomon seal, and I chose one, actually, you can put these right into your kratom. And I chose ones that are generally considered safe. There's certainly other stuff that you can use that's a little bit stronger. Oat tops is probably my favorite. That's where oatmeal comes from. It's literally the top of the oats plant. You can use oat straw, which is not quite as strong, which is the leaf of the oat plant, or the milky oats, which is harvested at there's like a 2-week window where you can there's a milky substance when you squeeze the fruit of it. It will literally squirt a little spot of that. That's considered the most nourishing and moistening. So oats is a nourishing nervine. In particular, if you're using the kratom as a mood elevator enhancer, this is a great choice. It's food and it's moistening, not so much that you're going to get like pooping yourself or anything. So this combines very, very well with the kratom. Solomon seal is a Western herb that grows up in the Midwest. It grows in ponds and lakes and things like that. It comes from the use of this for tendon issues, for dry tendons, comes from Jim McDonald, who's an herbalist up there in Michigan, who we love, and he basically knew it from the Ojibwa, the native people up there, and their use of it as food as medicine. It tastes good. You can just eat it, but again, you can put that in with the kratom to counteract it. So if you're using it for pain, and you tend to be that dry, wiry person, especially if it's like you just always feel contracted and tight, this Solomon seal, and it's also a Chinese herb. It's different, same genus, different species. Huangjing
Well,
is
hold on,
the
just because
Chinese
you
herb.
said something that I want to make sure you know, because it goes back to your question. So when Bob did the oat tops, he's like, and you're not going to poop yourself. Eating oil will make you poop yourself. Like even a little bit, if your gallbladder's not working quite right. Like our body's not meant to ingest oil as a whole into our body. It would come in the package of food, and then the parts would be added out. So if you were that constitution that were a little bit more phlegmy, that when you put oil into your body, it would cause a real stomach disruption versus somebody who is very, very dry. So that's one of the things that this is a safe way of doing it.
These are all very kind to the body.
Yeah, very much nourishing, and people need them, and so that's the reasoning for that.
Mai Mendong is a Chinese herb that is used for like dry lungs, dry stomach, where it's just always kind of like gnawing hunger kind of thing, dry, wheezing, difficult to breathe, or the skin's very dry. Mai Mendong can be added. And then Tian Mendong is asparagus root. In China, we call it Tian Mendong. In India, it's Shatavari. And Shatavari is a nourishing, subtle aphrodisiac, but it's moistening, and we say for the lower body. So again, drinking too much kratom, have that dry, watery, wiry body type, any one of these. So we can go mental, physical, upper, lower. Yo.
Thanks for making fun of that quick. You really feel like the drying nature characterizes its pain fighting fully?
It's not the nature of it. The pain fighting is separate, but it's a side effect that just is the constitution of the plant, if you will. If we overuse astragalus, it's great, but if you're already too dry, it's going to dry you out. But the dryness of it has very little to do with its immune boosting function or anything else. So it's just the nature of it that we have to understand.
It's the personality of the plant. It's dry.
I read in a book, I think it's the one that you guys sell, that tells you about the energetics of the herbs, and it's something striking.
Well, we have an argument about it within the industry. Like we always do this. Like you can even read in encyclopedias and dictionaries where people will argue about the definition of something. That within our group we have this argument with it, and we conflict in some cases. But it's because you've been with us so much.
We argue on it.
That everything's dynamic and moving and changing. And an actual plant, as we've already spoke about with this, because I heard Bob saying it, you harvest it this time on this side of the mountain during this season, and you use this part. It's going to do this, but if you get it 6 months later and you cut it this way and you add it with that, then it's going to do that, period. And so I use it in a way that's different than Bob, but he would agree with me when I did it. And if it's cut a certain way and it has a certain piece of the root, then I would consider it to be nourishing. It's left into the pot of stew, which is actually the medicine, and then you chew on it and you eat it. So therefore it's actually adding to you, versus somebody who is immensely deficient and very, very ill, the astragalus in particular. And with all of those adaptogens, again, because you've been in class with us, with all of those adaptogens, we never nourish somebody who's very, very sick with them, except for astragalus. So that's the argument. So that's why they have to say that, because all of those adaptogens, they'd say that. But that's the one because we actually give them the root and we don't extract
And
from
that's
it.
a really weird plant because, sorry, for those of you who have no idea what
We
we're
just
talking
went on
about,
a
I
rabbit hole,
apologize.
yeah,
It has an upward energy, and so we have to be careful with things like hypertension and so forth.
Because it will shoot it up.
Unless you use massive dosages, and then it doesn't. I got nothing for that.
So
It's just
again,
reality.
back to the formulation, and we're talking about things that you would learn in a couple years of herb school at minimum. When we're saying this, we're just like, it's one of those things where just trust us. Everybody needs that, especially in our society, and that will keep the side effects away. Trust us, you know, because we can't explain it other than those are nourishing. We need them. We should be eating most of those every day. Almost everybody, almost 100%. And so the astragalus is actually that weird when he had to say that out loud.
Yeah, I know. Why did I have to
He
use
should have
that
said
one?
astragalus.
Tractalodes.
But it can be
It's nourishing, but because it gives you energy, it's going to burn some fuel.
Okay.
If you don't have any fuel, it will dry you out.
Okay.
It's not drying. Kratom's actually drying. It's astringing and pulls your tubes together that excrete fluid. So it goes like this to the tubes that excrete fluid. So no fluid's coming out. Versus that one will burn wood that's not there on the fire. So it has to take it from somewhere. So it will dry it out accidentally.
Okay.
Does that,
Yeah.
When you're making
Okay.
a
That makes
brew,
better sense.
we can talk
can
about it. Like,
do you typically use one of those at a time, or could you use all of them?
You could use more than one, but usually just one.
you guys, the oat straw that was at the top, totally.
That's
Like,
my number one
Everybody
choice.
can have oat
Yeah.
straw.
And,
So
and I will say, I did make some. I threw the Solomon seal and the oat straw in.
And he's flumming. Like he can't be drying because he burns it all out, but he also has a phlegm condition. And the oat straw in particular is just neurological fatigue that we live, like the cars driving at us are tigers chasing us all of the time. Like there's never a point where anything settles down when we're in the city. And so everyone needs the oat straw. And that's the equivalent of me telling you to eat a spoonful of oatmeal every day. Nobody would ever say that was dangerous for someone, a spoonful of oatmeal every day, because that's what it is. It's basically oat straw, a portion of the oatmeal. So it's safe for everyone to always use the oat straw, and you'll get a heightened intellectual and mental fatigue benefit from it. That is something that we desperately use for people who are neurologically impaired, let alone just the average person who's having fatigue in their mind.
How do typical bars around here do it? Do they mix those in, or they just do kratom?
They just do kratom.
They just do kratom.
And
It's-
some of them get fancy.
This is what I was going to say, that I've taught some of the formulators at some of them, and they bought patent formulas off of me. And what I was doing desperately, because it freaks me out, I was desperately trying to account for the masses and when I formulated for them. And so they'll have, like, there's this tea called Long Life tea, that's because it just makes the person feel great that I made it for. It's one of the major bars. And now that's the favorite thing to mix the kratom with. And so I knew that when I was making it. And it has, like, licorice in it that's very, very mucilaginous and soothing, but not enough to go to the heart or the kidney, which we worry about. And so some of them will ask you, do you want this mix? And it will have rhodiola in it, which is mentally stimulating.
Like dry.
Yeah, but dry. But they can get the effect of the calm one, that's for anxiety, that brings you down, but then not get the brain fog or the sleep tendency, so that they can use the anxiety one but still be alert. And so some of them do that, but no, they just use water, citric
Yeah.
acid.
And they'll do that. They're really good. They'll show blends where you can just like, I just need a double green or whatever.
But that's why you have to be careful, and that's why we do these free classes. Like, you never flip and know. And there's several of them that people say, and this is people who work there even, say, no matter what, I always get a stomach ache with this. And I'm like, yeah, I know why, because they're just throwing coconut powder in it for them. You know, it's not actual coconut. And so we know that, and that's okay, but that's just like going to any bar and getting a gin and tonic, that's a well gin and tonic at 4th Street, not to demean them, it's different than a well gin and tonic at the Rococo that's like highfalutin to begin with. One of them's going to be complete gut rot, and one of them's going to be a little bit higher than actual well. It's just something that you just have to figure out where your tummy lies. We trust all of them for the most part, and they all are fairly good about caring about their patrons here.
You know, it's really nice that the Kava Kratom bars around here
I have
are...
handouts for that.
Oh, awesome. Yes, please.
That's what I was doing.
It's a very... we have the largest concentration of Kava and Kratom bars in the nation. Like, probably the South Pacific is the only place that has more. And I have no idea why. It's interesting to say the least. But it's a tight community. Both the patrons are a really close, tight community. On the whole, most of them don't have any alcohol at them, and that we encourage that they don't have alcohol, and that'll make more sense with the Kava. So it's a sober crowd, which is unique, that people can get together, have fun, and not be drunk. But I would say all of the owners of those places are all very politically active. I've been party to a number of them raising, and they've all donated a portion of their profits, or literally thousands of dollars, to support the American Kratom Association. And they work together and they've come together. There's not many professions that do that very well. So for a very new profession in this area and in this country, like, kudos to that community for really, keeping their heads out of their butts and being proactive and keeping their act together. And I will say, we're going to pass around, just if anybody wants propaganda from the American Kratom Association, please check out their site. Don't believe any of us on any of this stuff. We all have a bias, right? I'm an herbalist. Herbs kick butt, and so that means they're awesome and everybody should do them. No. And the FDA thinks, oh my God, they're unregulated, evil, evil, evil. And so we clash. Somewhere in the middle is the truth.
And we have new science come out every day that we don't even know about. So please always do your, Bob's right, always do your studies.
And this is the counterpoint. And if you, and I know some of the faces in here, and I know some of the stories that go with it. This plant is saving lives. It's getting people off of serious legal and illegal drugs. It's allowing people with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia to exist. Heroin, opiate addiction is a horrible, horrible thing that destroys lives, not just of the individual, but families. And this is allowing people to safely and effectively getting people off of those. Even if you're hooked on this, if you weren't able to get off of this, it's a plant and it's generally safe, and the worst side effect is puking. So it's okay. Yes?
Is it safe to take if you're already taking pain medications?
It's counterproductive because so when we talk about receptor sites, there's like this lock-in key, and so on every cell there's like opiate receptor sites, just like there's cannabinoid receptor sites. And so they're competing for the same thing. So if you're taking like an oxycodone for pain and you're drinking this, they're fighting for the spot. Okay. So it's not dangerous.
You could start to slide it, but you're just wasting your medicine one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So
you have to come off of...
No, and so as a way to taper off of your prescription medicine, always do that with a doctor who prescribes your prescription medication.
Never come off your medicine.
Ask them the safe use of kratom.
Don't do that.
They would just call the cops. No, they won't. It's not against the law. But there's two different ways that people use. Some people just cold turkey. They start drinking kratom and they don't take their meds anymore.
We've had success stories over that, but it's crazy. You shouldn't do that.
That seems terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And it's only with opiate drugs. Other people will taper, where they're cutting back on. They slowly increase their kratom as they slowly decrease their opiates. And there's not a magic number on how we do that. Everybody's different based on which medication they're on, legal or illegal, as well as their own body type and constitution and other things that are going on there. So like, work with somebody, whether it's your doctor, herbalist, whatever. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge. They're not always in a medical institution that know stuff. Just make sure they're not just throwing junk at you.
As Bob's going to erase and write other things, I'm going to say several things about this. The first thing is the community working together. It's because they're all coming from a place where this is literally their medicine. And when we have a vested interest in the fact that all plants and all things of the earth should be accessible to all people in the community. And so that's a ridiculous thing to think that anyone had the right to regulate any of that. And when we see people getting well, they all decided together that we're just going to support that, even if we're competitors. The other thing is, I have trained at least one, and in several places, 2 or 3 or 4 of the tea tenders or formulators in every single kratom bar except for one, because it's just new, and someone hasn't been there. So for the most part, there's somebody there that knows something.
Stuff.
Yeah, the words that we've said and understand some of it, whether they're sticking to it is depending on which place, but I'm only saying that as a matter of they've heard it, like at least we've told them the right thing, and I think they all have a really good heart about it, within reason, for sure. I mean, of course, they're business owners, but I think for the most part, they're in it for the right reason, that it's not entirely just to make money, and so it's something to think about, and I think does anyone have any questions before we go forward with that? One more tiny comment, because we talked about it, that I had a cancer client that I'm a clinical practicing herbalist that has cancer clients a lot, often, and I had a cancer client come off of fentanyl patches in 36 hours, not because I told them, but what happened was within the first 12 hours they felt so much better that they started eating for the first time. They were like wasting, like cachexia, and they felt so much better that they were like, oh hell no, like they realized all of a sudden that it was literally the medicine that was keeping their appetite down, and that's literally what was killing them. And so they yanked it without telling me, just cold turkey with it. So that's how successful it's been. I would not ever advise that, but I've had more than one story where, like Bob said, they just cold turkeyed it because it was just such a huge difference between filling the receptor site or damaging the receptor site, that it just felt like you were actually getting a whole plant, a nourishment item.
And on that, I've had a few too many people who like stop taking insert prescription med that's dangerous.
do that.
They stop taking it for 3 or 4 days and then come see us. It's really rough.
Really rough, yeah.
Please come talk to us before you do anything. Talk to
Yeah.
your doctor. Taper.
Yeah.
It's really tough for us to help a whole heck of a lot when you're in the throes of withdrawal when we first see you.
It's so much easier to walk you up to the
True.
door and open it than to grab you from falling off the other side and pull you back up.
Yes, that's a great analogy.
It will, yeah, it is so much easier to be like, oh, don't step off, than to like try to pull you back. And so definitely ask ahead of time. We'll give you education.
Let's talk about Kava Kava. Still just as controversial. It's funny. This is from the same area, oddly enough. Although, and this is in the pepper family, as in black pepper. It's the piper family. The piper family is an amazing category of herbs, and I have some at home, but I don't have any here, and I forgot to bring it this morning. There's a lot of controversy. There's a root beer plant, which is a piper, I forget what the species is, and then the piper methysticum, I can never say that word right, which is the true kava. The problem is there's over 600 different subspecies of kava kava that grows throughout the South Pacific, from northern Australia all the way through Hawaii and west. There's a number that grow in Central and South America that look very similar and actually have the exact same properties. They are antispasmodic, anti-anxiety, and numbing. And that's kind of when if you go to a kava bar, you drink some coffee, you're like, my mouth will go numb. And it's funny, and the traditional use of them in those places is almost identical. Kava's, I always say, God, it was probably 15 plus years ago, 20 years ago. Well, no, it was longer than that, because I actually had some in the middle of the desert in Kuwait. There was a group of soldiers. We were part of the UN peacekeeping forces. I made the mistake of volunteering, and there were a few troops from there. I think they were from Guam. I'm not really sure. And they actually had the hollowed out bowl with the 3 legs, and they did the very traditional method. And every island has their own traditions. This particular tradition was everybody was going to partake, got a piece of the root, and you chewed it up and you spit it in the bowl, and then you add a little bit more water and you mix it up, and then you pass the bowl around, and it is a sharing in the truest sense of the word. I didn't know a lot about kava at the time, and I was like, that's fucking gross. And I went politely and handed it on. So I did not have a great, or at least not an interesting experience. The next time I made it, I was probably 15 plus years ago, and made it, and I really I had done a little, somebody would give me, and I'm like, whatever. So I made it, and I made it really good. And I took it, and the best I can describe it is it was an anti-anxiety, so I got really chatty without acting. And it was, my best description is, it's like having 2 drinks without the stupid. And that's kind of nice, right? Who doesn't want to get their shoulders out of the ear? You know, a bunch of weirdos, you know, strangers here, like and so it's a social lubricant. It is a social drink. Anytime you go into any of the small South Pacific islands is an opportunity for kava. And so visiting everybody, so it's considered recreational. It's considered to be ceremonial. It is spiritual, and it's medicine. So it can be used in any of those ways. It, just like any good plant, has its issues along with it. The aerial parts of the plants, the above ground parts, should not be used internally at all. The only part that we use is the root, internally.
No, and I have something quickly to say about that. When you're going out to get it made for you, you have no way to dictate that, ever. And when you get it someplace like an apothecary, you can choose to get the actual root in pieces or to get it powdered. And if it's powdered, then you don't know what they've dried and powdered, versus if you can see the root pieces, you can determine 100% what you're getting. So I'm just like throwing that caveat out there. If you go to a certain place and you always get kind of a stomach ache when you go there, like just be thinking of that. They may not even realize that they're getting some of the aerial parts that they would use to help extend and make money off of.
So, and that brings us to a little history here. So for 10,000 or so years, herbs were the primary form of medicine for all of us, and continues to be for dogs and cats who go out and eat puke grass and things like that.
85% of the world's population
Still uses herbs as their primary form of medicine. But here in our European and the U.S., herbs really kind of fell out of favor for a good period of time. Basically, shortly after the formation of the FDA.
Literally.
Yeah, there used to be two schools of thought. There was the eclectic physicians and there was the MDs. And they had equal status, and they had medical schools like everything else. And there was actually, I think it was it not Michael Moore? No, one of the guys was going to write a kind of a historical fiction kind of thing. Literally, they were having shooting wars. That they were fighting each other over cadavers. It was a very difficult thing to do. So they were literally, these two medical schools are shooting at each other in order to get dominance over a particular area to get access to the cadavers. Ultimately, the FDA was formed and the MDs won. And the last eclectic, I want to say, died in the early 50s. But their writings and so forth are still out there. But we saw a resurgence in herbal medicine as a viable source of some medical care, but also as a fad. So we see this late 60s, early 70s, everybody's doing herby stuff, and Valium, Mama's Little Helper, everybody was taking these anti-anxieties, antidepressants, and then people found out about kava. So it was one of the heavier used herbs, and so it went from 0 to 100 and nothing flat. There is a lot of money in the herbal industry. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, just like the pharmaceutical. It doesn't quite reach the level of pharmaceuticals, but it is a big money industry. So guess what? There's unethical people in the herbal industry in the same way that there's unethical people in every industry. And there is a huge demand for Kava Kava. And there's these small South Pacific islands that are like, what do you guys want our plants for? Supply was being challenged to keep up with demand in the early stages of all of that. So what was happening is we had a few unethical idiots who were taking all of the plant, aerial and the roots, drying it, powdering it, and shipping it off together. And in Europe, there was, I think it was 50 some odd adverse reactions, to include one death. And so the the British Herbal Society said, wait a second, there shouldn't be that many adverse reactions. We need to investigate this. So they asked for all the adverse reports. And in the meantime, this herb was banned in most European countries and continues to be in many. Still banned in Canada. Banned in a couple of states here in the U.S. It's legal here, don't worry. What they found is there were a few duplicates. Okay, we can throw out some of those. There was elevated liver enzymes were the #1 adverse reaction that we saw. And the liver enzymes is a measure of cell death. So we don't want those to cells to die really fast. So the higher the number, the faster that thing's kicking off. So the people who are getting the crappy product from the aerial parts of the kava were seeing elevated liver enzymes. When they stopped, they went back to normal. There was a number of cases where there was a more severe adverse reaction where it was like starting to be liver failure. When we look at herbs, like we're like, here, have this ground up herb and cook it up and make this nasty tea, right? Well, there's other ways to do it as well. You can extract herbs in a solvent. Things like, well, water is a solvent. We can use vinegar as a solvent. We can use alcohol as a solvent. There's an amazing solvent though. Acetone. It's one of the best solvents out there. Like, it will take paint off your walls, it will take your fingernail polish off, and if you read the side of the container, it also says it will cause cancer and lung blah, 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 blah. So it's a horrible, horrible thing, but it's a great solvent. And so what there was a few really creepy companies doing, they were using the acetone to extract the active constituents, and then they were trying to, like, use good chemistry to get rid of the acetone. Well, it didn't work. So there's a couple of really creepy products out there that was causing some liver failure. There was the one death. There was a car accident. There was a bottle of Kava Kava found in the back seat. That was a kava-related death.
Huh.
And was the primary cause for the banning of that herb in a number of countries. So we need to ban McDonald's. So how many times have they found the wrappers of a Big Mac in the back seat of the car and a vehicular homicide? So cell phones are out too, by the way. Those are killing people left and right. So basically it was with this report, a number of the countries backed off, but some have not bothered to reinstate access to this herb. So it is banned in many countries still. And it goes back to the same things we were saying about kratom. Quality control, knowing your distributors and so forth is really important. Interestingly enough, it is best extracted in a fat. And so for all the kava bars, and you know, they call it getting muddy and things like that, because it tastes like crap and it looks like mud. And it doesn't have to. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't have to taste like crap. If any of y'all kava bar owners, come talk to me. There are many different forms of fat, and they use some emulsifiers that are cheap and easy. Coconut milk is one really fatty product, tastes pretty darn good, and phenomenal extractor of kava. In this case, we can add other herbs into it to make it taste good. I'm not going to embarrass myself. Can you draw just a rough kava leaf up there? I am not an artist. She has lovely skills.
Not either.
So there's a concept in herbal medicine called doctrine of signatures. And it's the idea if something looks like something, it might be good for it.
No.
And the idea that walnuts look like a brain, therefore it must be good for a brain. Well, that's just crazy talk. You know, the Chinese have been saying that for a couple of thousand years. But some yahoo decided to invest a couple $100,000 and found out that there's some unique essential fatty acids that are special in the walnut that seems to reduce inflammation in the brain. So maybe there's something to this crazy talk. So the kava leaf is shaped like a heart, and not an actual heart, but the way we symbolize the heart in a lot of different societies, actually.
It actually depends on how it's coming in, on what part of the tree, but it actually literally
There's usually a bigger dent.
dips it. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's actually usually a dent that comes and literally comes up.
So one of the unique things in Chinese medicine is we talk about these energetic hearts, and the associations that we have with the heart is anxiety, sleep, mental and emotional health in general. And this herb is specific for anxiety and sleep. The idea that it looks like a heart and is good for it, I'm going to go with that. So
it also feels that way. It's also very nourishing when you touch it. We talked about this plant being drying right here. And if you come up and you feel it, which you definitely can, you can run your hands down its vein, and it literally, like, you can almost hear it now. It goes click, 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 because it's so dry and so veiny. That's very, very nourishing and very luscious and hangs over on you and is cool and feels like moisture, even though it can be drying, but my point is very nourishing. It feels that way.
So one of the things that combines very well with this is cacao. You know this. I was going to say, I know I'm going to turn you around. So cacao chocolate, it's where chocolate comes from, but it's in its whole form. Combined with this, does cool stuff.
Okay. So there's great debate and argument as to which kava is the right kava, and depending on what island you land on, that will be the one that's the correct one. And so when I was in Ecuador 2 years ago, I worked with some tribes down there, many, and we live with them and we're in the forest with them, in the jungle with them, as well as we do botany and have botanists with us. I was staring at basically what was the kava plant in the jungles in Ecuador, not a Polynesian island. And the tribesman that was guiding us that day watched me stare at it, and we were talking about the medicine of it. Like, he saw me looking, and he 3 ways translated, like, wanted me to say what I was looking at. And I, of course, sprouted off the botany of it all, and he's like, no, that's not what I mean. And I was like, okay, well, then I told him the person I was looking at, what that plant looked like to me. And he was saying, well, because you said that, you recognized her and you could have the medicine. And gave us this huge dissertation about it working as a heart opener, and that it needs to be used always as a community heart opener. Remember, never on a Polynesian island doesn't know they exist, lives in the jungle, doesn't see people other than his own tribesmen. And he's saying it's exactly used for the same thing as what they would have used it in a tribal sense. And so through that, we went through, and it's also fields of cacao, fields of ayahuasca, and this other stuff called espingo. And talked about how all of those in the jungle are considered to be master plants, and their responsibility is to heal our hearts, both figuratively and specifically, like cardiac tissue heart healing. So in particular for cacao, for kava, the medicine that goes with that is, other than using, like, cacao is heart opening as well. It's there to help us accept the healing that our heart needs and be open to it. The kava is to heal the vessel of that heart, the actual container. The ayahuasca would be to heal and hold the container and to be able to weather the burden of our broken heart or the heart issues we were having, to be able to hold the burden of that healing. And the espingo would be to soothe you and wrap you up as a mother, to take care of that. And those are all the things we add. Like the espingo is cinnamon, and we add things like cinnamon to our kava when we make it. And they taught us this recipe. In fact, I have a thing of cacao honey here that has all of them in it if you wanted to taste it. I'll have to see if we have any left.
I didn't see any over there.
Okay.
I saw the rose.
Okay, thank you. And so the reason why that's important is because then he told me that now you recognize this plant and it knows you and it's accepting, so I'll teach you that medicine. And it's straight up cardiovascular medicine, that you can use it for trauma and injury, that you can put it right over top of a bruise, and where the veins of the kava are, the bruise won't be there anymore. It'll move that out. Like, it's totally circulatory, cardiovascular,
Tell them
trauma.
how they have to activate it.
Straight up trauma. And so there's a special way that you have to activate the veins with fire and this whole thing, and it works. I've done it here now many times, and it totally works 100%. And it's literal cardiovascular medicine and trauma medicine, just like for injury, immediate injury, to keep it from having to go to the hospital, like a broken bone or severe sprain. And so they use it also spiritually the same way. And when you see what's in it, like the first time I ever made kava for Bob before I lived here, I brought him, for real, that is not true. You and Barney sucked it down. So I made him, it's just because it's strong and he's a little sensitive. So I made it with cacao and cinnamon, like I made it with all the things that were supposed to be in it that way, which could have been a problem if somebody wasn't willing to be heart opened at the time. But it sounded like you had a good time. You said you did. I'm just saying, it's things that I would have naturally put in, just been drawn to as a formulator, put in with no forethought, just as a matter of, this sounds like it would be good, because this tastes like gas. Like, I'm going to put stuff in it that tastes good. And it is similar to the recipe he uses, again, just because he thought it would be good. And now here we are, like, years later, and I'm in the jungle, and they're like, oh, you need to add espingo to it. Well, espingo is a cinnamon tree. It's a kind of cinnamon that's in the jungle. And so it's things like that. The cacao needs to be consumed before you ever have that. And that's exactly what it is. And so it's interesting when it happens that way, and we know the scientific uses for it. Actually, an awesome heart medicine. I was gonna say, like, what are you writing?
Nope, go ahead. Keep talking.
Oh, it's okay. So Bob in particular makes things that taste good. Generally, his kratom is always horrifying. If he ever offers it to you, say no and run. It's disgusting. It's horrible.
Is that what that is?
He probably made it safer for you guys. I don't know because he also likes to laugh. But if you have a question in the back, I'm going to tell you about the goyusa real quick too.
So for the kava leaf top glues, you have to heat it.
Yes.
You have to, but it has to be open fire.
A lighter.
Yeah, it has to be open fire. And he was very adamant about it because he knew that when we got back, that we would have these new high-fangled things like, I don't know, a propane burner. And he's like, no, it can't be that. It has to be fire. Make sure it has to be living fire. It happens to be that for that tribe going forward, and then later, a year later, I ended up being their smoke and fire tender. So the fact that they gave me medicine that had to be activated with fire, and he was very precise about it, and he wasn't for anyone else. I was only to be the one that used it because I was the one that recognized it. It has to be live fire, he kept saying. So you heat the bottom half of the leaf just where the veins are. You just wave it over, and the second you can feel it, you flip it and do the other side. And then you use that like a bandage on the trauma, and you keep peeling it off and heating a new one and peeling it off. And you can see the plant actually turn colors on your body as if it's being used, like the constituents are being sucked in. And we know from things like Chinese medicine with the moxibustion that sometimes certain herbs and certain plants with a catalyst, heat or cold or whatever it's going to be, will energetically move things and speed things and change the direction of them. So the first week back, I think it was the third day, I was at the coffee shop, the same one that I was talking to you guys about earlier, and this kid ran up, and I say kid, but it dates me, he's probably 20-something. I have a baby that's 21. So this kid runs up and says, hey, I got a bee sting, and somebody told me the plant doctor's always here. Do you know where she is? I'm like, yeah, it's me. Okay, it's okay. So here, hold on, because people regularly come up there to get me. And I looked around, and she has a kava plant growing that came from our yard. And it's just in the back, like she likes to have plants everywhere. So I run back there, like, okay, and grab it and do it and slap it on. He's like, oh my gosh, that feels so much better. What about these? And bless his heart, like me, I'm a farm girl, grew up with bees. He said he had a bee sting and showed me this bee sting. And then he said, what about these? And it was really hornets that had like multiply attacked him, and they were all down the whole side of his leg. God. Yeah, like he was definitely, like he was not letting on. It was horrible. It went down one whole side. So I ran back and slowly heated up and put down the side of his legs. And in the time it took me just to get back with the first one, this was completely, that was it. He was like, oh, this is fine. Wow. And it had, the swelling had gone down, the pain was gone, and that was the first time I did it. I've done it many times since then, whenever it's around, because it's very easy to grow here. It's around a lot, like pipers like that are around a lot. And if you think about, like in our yard, there's this other thing called Piper Lalat, which is in that same family. I bet we could do it with that one too. And it's also shaped like a heart, and it's also so sweet. And Rocio, who's one of my Ecuadorian teachers, would use it in Olympia to like beat you if you needed your energy changed, like cleansing and clearing. I'd beat you with the Lalat. So that I can see it totally working. I haven't tried it, but I bet it does. And it's shaped like the heart, and it's yummy, and we eat it to help us with nourishment. Yes?
In terms of like culture with kava, I heard that in the Pacific Islands, women, in terms of gender, that there's like a gender segregation there, but it sounds like maybe in South America, not so much.
There is. It definitely is. In the medicines back and forth, they determined that I was a male from the very beginning, and I was in charge of protecting the group of women that we were with. And so, like, the chief of the group is about this big, and I was on boobs. So, like, this is how I met him. And I also am generally put in that role out on our continent, whether I want to be or not. I'm like, they don't know this, but I'm a fire tender here, which is a male job traditionally, and a smoke tender and protector here, which is a male job traditionally. So what happens in the islands and where they're going to use it, and again, depending on what island you go to, it's whether or not their story is the right story, and everybody thinks their story is the right story with the right plant.
I was going to say, there's an alternate story that women are actually the ones who first received the knowledge of kava, and that they reserve a particular species of kava that only they are allowed. And the idea was they were out harvesting roots in the marshes there, and the kava god, if you will, actually entered her between her legs and that it imparted knowledge of the world, kind of like a tree of life kind of idea.
If you ever see it growing, you'd understand why that was like that.
And
It's just sprouting
only
up from the
they
ground.
know that
Yeah.
plant, where the guys get the crappy one.
So let me tell you why that is, though.
Is there like a certain location where?
Oh, you tell me. I wasn't allowed to know
No,
that.
not where that happened. I just
Where
mean,
it grows?
Like culture. How is there an area where like culturally women are involved in
Almost
the
always.
ceremony?
Okay, this is so like it feels so
That's how
bad.
you grow.
So let's to say like we need remember how I was pointing out the classes? Come to one of the celebration classes, and
there are many cultures that are
almost
women-dominated.
every culture is actually female segregated and dominant. Like they'll pull you from ceremony, and you'll think that they're pulling you away, and it's because you have too much energy. They're afraid of your power.
During menses, there's
You are,
some,
like,
in the
super god.
Cherokee tradition. There's some ceremonies where a woman on her menses are actually encouraged to participate because they're so powerful. There's other ceremonies where it's like
You'll blow it up.
You'll screw everything up because you're so powerful at that time.
Yeah.
And so it's not that it's like, oh, we've bastardized so many of these ideas in our modern
So
culture.
think about like it's not grandpa's soup that's going to heal you. It's always grandma's chicken soup that's going to heal you. The ones who knew how to use the spices, the herbs, were always the mamas that were cooking medicine for the sick, the baby catchers. If something goes wrong with birth, somebody's bleeding out, they're running to get the mama, the grandma, the auntie. That it's always generally the women. And in that culture, what it was is that was generally used, like, so think of it in this, during war for sure. So you guys go over there and you deal with your crap, but, like making the men deal with their stuff. But it was generally used when two families were going to come together that were juxtaposed or in offense in some reason, and there was going to be a marriage, so they had to argue the dowry, and all the family and all the clan had to come together and share food, and it took several days to do it. And they would have definitely segregated for the men to talk, and they all would. Like the women would be over here with the brides and the women and all that. Men would be dealing with the dowry and what was going to happen. They all would have been chewing and spitting and chewing and spitting and chewing and spitting to have the enzymes affected. I'm sure you told them all that, right? And so the men would be doing their area and the women processing their area, or they'd be trading what they already used for them to go make it into what needed to happen. And so, yeah, they would have been segregated in that way.
But not the way that we.
No, we did that. That comes with the eclectic thing in the past 100 years. Nah.
I mean, even in Chinese medicine, although that's a male-dominant society, that concept of yin and yang, they're inseparable. And so not one or the other is more dominant.
Mm-hmm.
They're different, but eternally together, and to separate them is death. And so it is, over time, we screw that all up in the way we change the meaning and understanding and all of that.
And there's not a single place that I have gone that I haven't been given more respect, being who I am, rather than less. And in fact, that chief that helped with that had to sneak me things to take home with me because he was not to be giving them to a female. And so I came home with these things called chutas, which are these warring spikes that they use and they put poison on, and they're made to dig out the evil out of people, to like stab and dig out the evil. And they're also made to kill great foe. I came home with blowguns and darts and things that were only, and he had to sneak them to me because he understood that it was only, I was the strength in the tribe, and it didn't matter whether or not I was a male or female, that it was his job. And he went home the night before and made them and brought them back and snuck them to me to the side while they were making us things and giving us things like this. So I had to bring my backpack and throw it down, and he filled the backpack, and then I had to end up giving it to the only male that was with us, who was a military guy who was keeping us safe there. For him to even get it through the dirt landing strip plane, he had to argue it through that if I would have had it, I wouldn't have been able to take it.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, all of it. No, just definitely we're the ones that do that. Everyone else is like, nah, we'll take you for medicine, for sure. Giving great respect for it.
So, if any of you are massage therapists or do body work of any sort, making a salve out of kava is phenomenal for muscle spasm. So it is a great herb internally and externally as an antispasmodic. Seems to focus on the muscles primarily. internally, you have to be a little bit more careful. It is drying, just like the kratom is. I wouldn't say as much. It's through overconsumption of kava that you'll start to get the drying action. A lot of our kava tenders have dry, cracked hands, and they get a lot of itchy, scratchy stuff. Yeah?
Are you able to take kava with pharmaceuticals, or would it be like the kratom where it's...
You have to be careful. So I always tell people never with alcohol. And with any of your antidepressants, anti-anxieties, and I would say anti-seizure medications, I would actually be very careful or avoid it altogether. We'll do an herb-drug interaction class again soon. But in general, when we take a plant for the same thing we take a drug for, there's a really good chance of an adverse reaction. We can turn that into a positive reaction. It's subtle. I hate to say it, I know a lot of the folks at the kava bars, and a lot of them are on meds that I would say, oh my God, I can't believe you're taking that one and drinking kratom every day, or kava every day. So it's isolated the adverse reactions that we do get, but they are out there. So you have to be super, super cautious with any of the anti-anxiety, antidepressants, and anti-seizures. And I would be a little paranoid or like, sip it. I would definitely not do high dosing. Again, capsules, extracts. It gets creepy. There's a story. Who's my island guy I love? But he's from Boston. I can't think of his name all of a sudden. He tells a story where somebody gave him this really powerful extract they made, and they made it at home. They're good herbal medicine makers. And it was probably like a 50-to-1 extract, so it was 50 times stronger, and he did like...
It's not Hoffman, Holmes.
No, none of the guys who have books. They found him, they gave it to him. Roy Upton, yes. Okay. I love Roy.
Reading is fine.
And so he did it, and they like all walked out of the room going, ha, 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 ha. And they turned around and came back, and he was paralyzed, unconscious on the floor. And he was just like, couldn't move because of the muscle relaxant and anxiety. Not in danger, just paralyzed for, I think he said an hour or so. And he was fine when he got up. So like, that's not the reaction we're usually wanting.
Well, not only that, Bob said something that's really important, and I said it several times with the kratom, and he said extract.
Yeah.
And we would never give you an extract of broccoli, just eat the broccoli.
Yeah.
Like, why, you don't need 100 florets of broccoli, you just need one and eat the broccoli. And so if we're having the whole plant and it's mixed appropriately and it's not some powdered craziness and it's not trying to increase it to the blah blah blah, you generally don't see the same reaction than taking a capsule or an extract or a gummy or anything like that.
So it's very normal if you chew kava, if you drink some kava, your mouth goes numb.
That's how you know you did it right.
Yeah, you got good stuff if your mouth went numb. And I find that it can be a little hard on the stomach. So not pukey like kratom is, but nauseous. For some people, I like the coconut milk, but for some people, the fat is too much for them. So when I make kava, I love to add the cacao, both from all the spiritual heart-opening kind of ideas, but I really like chocolate. But I add what's called carminatives, things that help the digestion, the ginger, cinnamon, and cardamom. But these herbs are all drying as well. The coconut milk a little moistening, so that counteracts some of the drying action of the kava. But if you're a daily user of kava for anxiety, or you work in a kava bar, I would recommend you can do any of the same herbs that we put up there before. The oat tops would be a great addition. But even more so, you might have to get a little bit more aggressive with it and use something like a seed oil, like a flax oil, a fish oil, and start to do some pretty high dosing of that if you're getting the cracked hands and fingers from overusing it. Yeah?
What would you, to make the salve that you were talking about, would you mix it with?
Actually, so the same way you would make anything, usually most people use a neutral oil like olive oil. Right. Infuse the kava in the olive oil, and there's good books out there. Medicine Maker's Handbook is a great book by James Green. And then strain out your kava, or you can leave some powder in it, don't matter. And then add beeswax to it to make a salve. Yeah.
Can you use the aerial parts, the leaves and the stems, to like infuse them in the oil to make the topical salve?
You know, I haven't, but yeah, probably. And maybe even a bonus.
I was gonna say
Maybe a painkilling property where you would do half, like one's a muscle relaxant, one's a painkiller.
Oh, so
maybe the combination of the
So
two.
do the aerial and the root?
Yeah, it wouldn't be wrong.
Topically, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I pull it out of the yard, because it's you guys, like because it's the herbalist and because I know my own plants, I'll move up the stem farther than I naturally would, only sticking with the white being the root. And we've never had an adverse effect. And in fact, everybody's always like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best kava ever," chewing on it and whatever. And so we've never had a problem with that. And I do that all the time. Like once a week, we are eating into the green. I'm chewing into the green. So topically, I think that topically only that would not be a problem.
Okay.
And
what if I use only aerial parts in the oil?
That'd be fine.
Would that still work, or just not as much as if I had
Yes.
this root?
I don't know if that it would be as strong.
Okay.
And it wouldn't. I don't know it to be antispasmodic, the aerial parts.
Versus painkilling.
Right. So I think it would, and remember, especially because the only way you're going to get aerial parts is if you're growing it. It's full of moisture, so you've got to wilt it at the very least before you put in oil. Otherwise, your oil will spoil.
Medicine making classes this weekend.
Right? Come on.
So wait, you're drying the aerial parts and then putting them in the oil.
Right, because if you put water and oil, bad things happen.
Let's go ahead and actually say that for any salve, you guys.
Yeah,
so
it's not unique
the
to
root
that.
is very much full of water. You would never be using anything fresh with oil because water and oil do not mix well and they would start to mold.
Hence the story.
Yeah, and that's why we teach herbalists how to make medicine. Because they'll ruin it, yeah.
And so you had a question.
How much would be a medicinal dose of Kava Kava?
I'd start probably around 1 to 3 grams is plenty in about a cup and a half of water and coconut milk. Oh, I didn't write water up there.
And so I was going to definitely say a teaspoon would be maximum, and that's 4 grams. So it's funny that he said that, you know.
1 part. And I usually go 4 to 6.
And it also depends on your processing as well. Like if you left it in a crock pot for like 24 hours, it's going to be
And that's the next
insanely
part.
intense. Like you don't want to do that.
Don't want to boil kava. So some of the properties are destroyed by overheating it. So my favorite way to do it is actually to put it in a muslin sack and kind of get close to that traditional use. I'll put it in a bag and squeeze it and have it warm where there's steam coming off, but not so hot that I can't put my hands in.
Which is very traditional. To knead it, like I talked about the women doing their part, they would have taken the chewed spit and they would have put it inside of palm fronds that were knitted together, and they would have pulled the palm fronds and let them go and pulled them and let them go, and that was going to knead them. It was kind of like Chinese finger cuffs that if you pull it gets tight and you release and it doesn't. That's what it looks. Well, that's what it looks like. And so they would sit there talking with their feet in these huge long things where they would be doing that, and all of the juice would be coming out, and then they would continue to use the root for other things during the ceremony. So it's that kneading that's very traditional. Not necessary, but really very traditional, and it's medicine and it's ceremonial.
So I literally, when I make it, I'm not a big measuring person, so I throw some kava in. I open up one of those cheap cans of coconut milk, full fat. You want the extra fat, none of this light crap. Dump that in, and then I'll just take that can and I'll dump more water in. It's hard to make just a cup, so make a quart of it, put it in your fridge. Heat it, stir it, squeeze it, however you want. You can strain it or leave it in. Doesn't matter which way you do it. I like leaving in the grounds. It just makes it a little bit stronger and it makes it very herby. And this is to taste. Like if you want a lot of milkiness, you want that high fat content, you can use a little less water. And remember, don't boil it, just warm it. And I hate to say it, it is inebriating. I would not do not operate heavy machinery after consuming this drink. Like seriously, you can get a little loopy and stumbly if you do too much. So there is no question you can do excessive amounts of kava. From what I've seen and read, and I don't drink, I save it for special occasions. I prefer that to getting drunk. I'll have 2 cups of kava. There are reports of dependence on it. But most of the reports are actually saying that the dependence is more emotional.
I was going to say, like,
and so in the same way that with cannabis, you'll get a 9% addiction to cannabis. That's more of an emotional addiction. and you know, we're addicted to air too. No. And so with kratom, without a doubt, there are things that cause dependence on it. The caffeine, we are going to have withdrawal from caffeine if we stop drinking it. With the kava, if you were using it to treat anxiety, guess what? Your anxiety comes back because it doesn't cure anxiety. It's a safer, more pleasant way to treat anxiety to help with your symptoms, but it's not going to go away because you did it 4 or 5 times. There are ways sometimes to correct anxiety, sometimes not. This isn't fixing it. This is just helping you handle it better. And like you asked, you know, definitely be careful with it with prescription drugs. Some of those anti-anxieties are powerful little boogers.
I've had more than one person in my family completely come off of several medications because of anxiety, solely based on the kava. But one of them is like 6'3" and 250, and he's like my baby brother, and he's a bit of a hulking human being, and his personality is so, and did respond the way Bob said, that would panic if he would get low. And I would make it in mason jars for him that were quart size, and I'd make him 6 to 8 at a time, and he would keep them in his refrigerator and then come back. And it allowed him to fly all over the country and do presentations to huge corporations and to even get on the plane. And when he wasn't doing that, he was like scrambling to the Whole Foods to find the tincture bottles because he had run out, to make sure he had the tincture bottles to even get back on the plane. And so it's something that was really highly effective for him, but he did respond as if he was addicted, even though he wasn't. He was more addicted to not being freaked out.
Yeah.
I've heard that the more you drink kava, the less
Yes, thank you.
or the
Good
more
one.
it is
Yeah.
available for your body.
It's an interesting thing, and I don't do it enough to actually experience it myself, but
I haven't
without
had
a
it either.
doubt, everyone who is a regular consumer, there's what's called reverse tolerance. So like with alcohol, it's like, well, the first time I got 1 beer, I was drunk, but now I need a whole case to get drunk, right? So that's tolerance, right? It's not the same as it was the first time you had it. Kava's the opposite of that. So the first time you take it, you got to drink a lot of it and I don't encourage anybody to get wasted on kava. That's not good for you anyway you slice it, you know. But if you're consuming it every day, using it for anxiety, use less and less and less over time. And so it's important that you pay attention to that if you are using it to treat anxiety or chronic spasms or anything along those lines, to know that you're going to cut your dose back over time. So thank you for reminding me of that. You know, it's probably 2/3 of you in here have tried both, and probably lots of other herbs. For some of you, some of this is all new. And so, yes, buy lots of Kava and Kratom from us, whatever. The Steep Station's 2 blocks away. It's awesome. It's a really nice place. And it saves you the hassle of trying to figure out how to make this crap. But, you know, my takeaway I hope that you have from this is 2 things. Most of you are here because you're curious about herbs, you're using herbs for medicine. Don't think it will always be there if you don't pay attention. You can lose the access to any of your plants in the drop of a hat at the whim of a politician or an agency.
Yeah.
So please pay attention, and you know, whether you're on Facebook or email or somebody walking down the street, take the time to put your name on something. Take the time to send an email or make a phone call. I can tell you I've done it so many times for 1,000 different issues. It takes 2 seconds. They don't ask you anything. They don't even want your name. They just put a tick mark next to a yay or a nay. It makes a difference. It really does. But the other part that I would encourage you is start to explore the benefits of herbal medicine, and more importantly, respect it as medicine. Nothing wrong with having fun. Nothing wrong with having fun with plants, you know, but understand that it is powerful stuff, and it can be used or misused. So anytime you do it, you know, Renee talked a lot tonight about ceremony, and so living beings, that life is taken in order for us to have fun, and that's okay. But we should do it out of reverence and respect, and understanding that a lot went into getting that kava plant over here or that kratom plant. So have fun, use it as medicine, protect your access to all plants, and just remember to pay a little respect. Whether it's toasting with a loud bula or just in your own head, thanking the plant and it showing up to help you at that particular time.
Do you need more cups?
I do and I don't. What I'm going to say is I have Kratom and I have Kava. They're not bad. It was better than the last time I did this class, actually.
And the other thing I want to show you is, do you see this
That's
line?
condensation. Oh, yeah.
That's a line of silk. Would you like to stir it?
Nah, no.
So,
what I would say now, please just reuse your cup. If you want to try both, please do. If you just want to try one, you're welcome to. But I'm gonna like pour half and half. So some of you can start.
I want to see.
Some of you can start with a Kratom. Some of you can start with a Kava. Renee, if you can. Yeah. No, I tasted it. I was like, ooh, my mouth went numb.
That's
So
good.
what is this one?
This is Kratom.
And I'm gonna start
And this
lining
is
up the
this is
Kava.
a green Mengda.
So which one are you giving out
Want
right
us to
now?
pass them back?
These are all Kratoms.
I'm gonna give a little bit, like halfway back.
Yeah.
Just to make sure everybody gets
Yeah,
some first.
exactly.
You guys have recipes, or when is your medicine?